Ty, Metalhead Weatherman here. Hopefully everyone's doing well. In light of time and the little gift that I got for my birthday last week. Well, really I've had this for a little longer than that. The second screen here, so a lot of time we're going to try something here. I hope this goes well. Definitely let me know in the comments what you think. But diving into things we go. And from what we can see as far as severe weather is concerned, not really much to talk about right now in the short term. But if we go to days 4 through 8, day 4 and 5, potential too low. But once we get to day 6 and beyond, predictability too low comes into play again. So while this isn't guarantee anything occurring, it's definitely a sign of the pattern change in the trend that we've been seeing for the last week or so, where we're seeing possibly more active weather towards Thanksgiving. Also, let's take a look at the tropics. In the short term, still too much wind shear here for anything to develop. But if we look at the 7-day outlook, and we've been talking about this a little bit too, we still have this area of interest over here towards the Caribbean. I do not think this is going to be a threat to the U.S. at this time, but we're still going to keep an eye on it. Nonetheless, though, if you're towards eastern Cuba, over towards Jamaica, Dominican Republic, maybe even Haiti as well, we'll have to watch this for development down the line, especially within the next 7 days. 70% chance of development going on there. Nothing else to really talk about otherwise across the U.S. front here. But if we were to go over to the wind maps here at the upper levels of the atmosphere, we're going to loop both of these. And this is what the Euro is kind of looking like. This is what the GFS is looking like. Actually, this is wrong. We need the Euro. But this is what the GFS is looking like here. And you can see the amount of amplitude within the upper level jets starting to increase, and that's a telltale sign. And you can clearly see that a lot of troughing is starting to come into play here. That's always a good pattern indicator for, or it's a good indicator for a severe pattern here. Then if we look at Euro, here is the Euro to the left coming into play now. You can see a pretty similar look here. So we have some congruence here between the models, some good model agreement, if you will. So that is always a good sign of a trend beginning to develop here, especially when you look into the long range. You often want to look for a little bit more along the lines of of a trend, some concurrence or congruency, and we definitely will see that also in different levels of the atmosphere. You can see this going on with the Euro here. We'll put this into a loop, and the dates that I really want to make note of with this is really once we get towards the 21st and beyond. So here's that first trough coming into play right around the time I mentioned, and then right at the end of this model run on the 10-day mark, that's when we start to see a much more stout trough becoming more prevalent here. And this is what has me a little bit more concerned. And this will be right around the time of Thanksgiving. So if you're traveling, especially towards the Midwest, maybe even the Gulf Coast, might want to be on the lookout. Could be potential for severe weather down the line here. While I have that in motion here, I'll go ahead and take a look at the GFS as well. Get this moving a little bit faster here. But it's going to be a pretty similar look. But once we go further down the line here, that's when things really start to get going. Again, pretty similar look right around the 21st when we see this develops, but this becomes a cutoff low, which is really interesting. And then once that gets moving, that's when we really start to see those storm systems start to ramp up in both intensity and number. So two different looks right now as far as the models are concerned, but still something to keep a very close eye on here. Still seeing plenty of consistency between the two as far as the setup is concerned, especially until we get up to about 200 hours out. Still a lot of unknowns with this, so I can't necessarily say exactly what will happen. However, one thing is for sure, we'll go ahead and look at the vorticity. This also will give us a good look at what these storms can potentially shape into here. Vorticity is always a good indicator for storm intensity. So we'll go ahead and put these both into a loop here. This is the Euro we're looking at first. And for the first little bit, nothing really noteworthy right now, but here's that little bit more stout storm system. And once we go beyond that point here, that's when we start to see a little bit more in the way of vorticity. You start to see that cyclonic spin, that counterclockwise motion that we're also accustomed to here. And pretty much for the next 10 days, I think for right now, we're going to be pretty quiet until the end of that point. And then as we look at the GFS, this is when things kind of get a little bit more interesting. Starting to see that storm system, maybe even a coastal storm this weekend is possible according to GFS. Then this is of course where we get that cutoff low, things get interesting. I do have my concerns about flash flooding if severe weather does not become a possibility. But nonetheless here, it looks like a pattern's definitely becoming more active, especially towards the south here. So the threat of shower storms may be severe. Definitely heavy rainfall seems to be an increasing possibility at this time. So that being said here, we're going to move over to the real big topic here, which is going to be more so the temperatures than anything else. This is looking at the height anomaly here. This is looking at the euro. We're going to just go one at a time with these. And from what we can see here, still dealing with that flip-flop type pattern here. But we're noticing a little bit more cold air starting to sneak in here. Like I said, with the El Nino strengthening, we're probably going to see something that's a little bit more familiar to a traditional El Nino setup, maybe a little bit more intense. This storm system also is going to have a decent little bit of a cool center to it, so I think the flash point is going to be right in between these air masses here. So that being said, if we look at the GFS, it's a pretty similar deal. We'll just run this forward. You see a similar look starting out. Cold air doesn't quite make it as far south. Do have that first storm system we're looking at there. And then as we continue to go forward, here's that cutoff low coming into play around the 21st. And then, interestingly enough, this is what causes the big pattern flip, and this is what allows that cold air to really start to surge to the east a bit more. And this could result in a notable drop in temperatures in the days ahead here. And then here's a big cold air mass coming into play, and this is going to be how we likely end out the month of November. So somewhere between Thanksgiving and the 30th, I would expect a relatively stout storm system. So like I said, still too far out to tell just what exactly the details will be as of right now, but potential for winter weather and severe weather do seem to be on the table at this point. We go ahead and take a look at the temperatures here. We'll throw both of these into a loop here. Start out with the euro. And you can kind of tell that things are kind of flip-flopping a bit more here because you see the cold air really starting to dive south. You see the warm air trying to make a comeback here, but for the most part, we're mainly going to start to see a little bit more dominance from the cold air masses more so than the warm. Look at the GFS here to your right, and we're seeing a similar story, but as we go further along, here's where we start to see that advance coming into play here. Of course, when we look further along into the run, of course, it's not a lot of confidence in that because we only have one model to look at past 240 hours, so something to keep in mind there as well. One thing I'm also going to take a look at here, considering that there's a chance for severe weather, is looking at the dew points, moisture returns, and one thing that I always try to make note of, if I can get this map to load, we'll give that a moment, we'll work with the euro here. There we go, moving slow. Just trying to do a lot at once, but when we look at the euro to start out with, not much in the way of moisture returns to start out, but once we get towards the 21st, you start to see that little increase right there in this region, and then as we continue to go on, we might see a little secondary surge try to develop here. Like I said, this is where we start getting to that little bit of a gray area here, and it's a world of unknowns. But if we could get decent moisture returns, maybe even some 60-degree dew points, we could have something here. Of course, like I said, 10 days out, not a lot of confidence really to be had there. And as we look at GFS, pretty much a similar deal. We start out seeing a pretty similar look here. That coastal storm looks like it has a little bit more moisture to work with here at about 100 hours out. but its track is really going to be the determining factor in regards to the situation ahead here. Here's a nice little moisture surge towards the 21st for southern Texas, and this is also partially why I have my concerns with flooding with this area. Then as time goes on, with that cold air starting to surge in more, it's really going to knock down those dew points here and kind of keep things dry starting out after Thanksgiving. But once we go beyond that point, we do see a couple of areas to watch, mainly towards the Gulf Coast, which is typical of an El Nino pattern. But like I said, this is going to be really more so the determining factor as to what could happen next. That subtropical jet looks like it's becoming more active, or the pineapple express it's called. I don't know why I couldn't get that word out. So what we'll do next is we'll go ahead and take a look at what we could be looking like as far as thunderstorm activity is concerned. Wouldn't expect to see much through the beginning of this run, but as we get towards the latter half of it, we could be talking a different story here. It's getting towards the 20th and the 21st. With the Euro having this set up and it not being a cutoff low, I can expect a little bit of an increase in activity here. We could see a decent amount of activity towards southeastern Texas and towards Louisiana. And then this storm system, as it continues to trek off to the east here, could see some continued activity. And then after that, we're mainly just going to be focusing on the south based off of this look here. So I guess the last thing to look at is the precip here. We'll start out with the Euro once again. And for the most part here, like I said, increased shower and storm activity to the south here. Like I said, subtropical jet starting to kick in, starting to have influence on that Gulf of Mexico moisture here. And this is where we start to see the potential for that coastal storm coming into play here. It's a fast mover, but the track and the timing is really what's off right now. But there is still potential for it at the moment. I really think this will end up being a bigger storm north of the border. But as far as what's ahead here, this is a little bit more stout. This is one of the more stout looking setups I've seen in a little bit. I don't expect much in the way of severe weather from this right now still, but nonetheless, it's definitely something I want to pay a little closer attention to. I think the threat of heavy rain is definitely prevalent with this setup here, that low pressure. We get that cold air to drop a little bit more south. We could maybe get some snow towards the Adirondacks, but we don't really get to see that in this case. But we do see another low pressure coming into play here, and this is going to more than likely make the latter half of Thanksgiving pretty wet. Then also we have this cold air beginning to surge towards the heart of the country, towards the northern end of the Rockies. We could be seeing an increase in wintry weather. Just how much is still to be determined. And then if we look at the GFS here, we're going into a loop. I'm not going to go too fast. Pretty much a similar look starting out. I think pretty much for the most part, with the exception of the 21st, we're going to see a pretty similar look. This is where I think we'll see that heavier rainfall lingering towards Texas a bit more. Actually can even see a little bit of snow towards the mountains here towards northwest Mexico. Then after that, the storms kind of, it's odd, even though the jet stream is pretty active still towards the latter half of the month, we aren't really seeing much in the way of storm systems yet. Could be a model glitch. We'll have to see what this looks like on a run-by-run basis. So I'll be probably making more videos as time goes on. But it definitely looks like we're going to start to see an increase in activity at the very least. Whether that will be severe weather, winter weather, or even tropical weather, hard to say at this point. But nonetheless, we'll be here to cover it. I want to say I appreciate everybody who's been sticking around through all of that. I know it's been quiet on here. I'm not always a guy to post a video every day. I don't want to give you guys the same old song and dance as far as that's concerned. There's nothing going on. But that being said, wanted to say again, appreciate you guys. Got some cool stuff I've been working on for the channel, especially for next year. So hope you guys enjoy that. But I got to get going here. It's been tired, Metalhead Weatherman. Hope you guys have a good day. Make sure you smash that like button, decimate that subscribe button, and obliterate that share button. Until then, take care.